magnified activities, relationships, and roles beyond the microsystem. A microsystem is a pattern of activities, social roles, and interpersonal relations experienced by the developing persons in a given face-to-face setting with particular physical, social, and symbolic features that invite or engagement in sustained, progressively more complex interaction with the immediate environment. Effects of the physical environment on the psychological development. So, patterns of relationship between certain features in the physical environment of the infant during the first 2 years and their cognitive development. In the paper, there are two general aspects of the physical environment that can affect the course of cognitive development of a child. One is for better and one is for worse, areas that invite manipulation and exploration. So, the mother infant yad as a context of development. A substantial body of research indicates that such processes also foster the development of a strong emotional attachment between a mother and a child, which increases the quality of future interaction between the two parties. Through interaction between the infant and the primary caregiver, the infant develops expectation of the caregiver's behavior and complementary beliefs about him or herself. An infant who experiences a history of contingent responsiveness from primary caregiver will develop a model that the caregiver is available and expects such behavior that child will develop a complementary sense of self that he or she is worthy of responsive care, while an infant who has experienced unresponsive care from his or her caregiver will develop a very different model of relationship, expecting the caregiver to be unavailable. Such an infant is expected to develop a sense of self as unworthy of responsive care. Here we can say that the mother-infant interaction is important to a developing person's mind. So beyond the microsystem, a basic premise of ecological system theory that developed as a function of forces emanating from multiple settings from the relations among the settings more on the environment. They analyzed adolescent school performance and they found that, in contrast to youth from European family backgrounds, Hispanic, African, or Asian American youth did not benefit from authoritative parenting. It is more on peer crowds or peer pressure. Their subsequent analysis revealed that European American youngsters from authoritative homes are more likely to belong to a peer crowd that encourages academic achievement. However, to youngsters from minority backgrounds among Black and Asian students, there was no relation between parenting practices and peer crowd membership. The expanding ecological universe. The ecosystem comprises the linkages and processes taking place between two or more settings, at least one of which does not contain the developing persons, but in which events occur that indirectly influence processes within the immediate settings in which the developing persons live. It is a network of families that develops through the child's peers relationship. More specifically, the parenting practices of their peers, parents, or the parenting styles of parents sa ilang friends na makapekto sa ilang school or sa ilang characteristics. Adolescents whose friends, parents are authoritative earns higher grades in school. They spend more time on homework and have more positive perceptions of their academic competence and lower levels of delinquency and substance use. So there are the adolescents na ay mga um, ang parents lang sa iyang mga friends is stricto. Apekto sa ilang maging maayos sila sa school So the other one is adolescents whose parents are already more authoritative appear to benefit more from membership in a peer network with other authoritatively reared youngsters than do adolescents in similar networks, but far from less authoritative. Nature nurture are conceptualize a bioecological interpretation. So nature or nurture, familiar naman tagol ani mga term if not context explain na nako kamay lang. So nature or genetics plays a big role in person's characteristics, while nurture is the environmental factors or experiences that shapes person's characteristics. So in the paper, they laid out three hypotheses explaining this um, nature or nurture thing. So in hypothesis one, proximal processes raise levels of effective developmental functioning and hereby increase the individual differences attributable to actualized genetic potentials for such outcomes. This means that genetics will be higher when proximal process is strong and lower when proximal process is weak. Hypothesis two is proximal processes actualize genetics potentials both for enhancing functional competence and for reducing degrees of dysfunctions. This means that if the level of proximal processes increase, indexes of competence. Lastly, in hypothesis three, if persons are exposed over extended periods of time to settings that provide developmental resources to a degree not experienced in the other settings in their lives, the power of proximal processes to actualize genetic potentials for developmental competence will be greater for those living in more disadvantaged and disorganized environment.
So, next is the role of time in the bioecological model. Time is important in the effectivity of proximal processes. As we can see here, temporal regularity versus instability and unpredictability of events. Temporal regularity is considered a good feature that is associated with cognitive development. An environment needs consistency and predictability with the space and time in order to have these proximal processes correctly functioning. So, chronosystem is the last added ring of the bioecological model. It encapsulates the conditions over time in the characteristics of a person and also the environment in which they live in. It interacts with other models and is divided in such as in micro, it encapsulates immediate real-time experiences within like specific episodes. In meso, it consists of repeated experiences done with frequency and consistency. And in macro, it encompasses major historical of our life events. And this involves like major life transitions and different societal shifts. So next is stability over time. We can see this as an example of the chronosystem as we are able to see the effects of stability, this interaction, and its frequency on the development of the person. So Leah Pulkkinen measured environmental stability and developmental effect it had on children through adolescence and young adulthood. She started with children on the age of 8 years old. She quantified stability through the number of family moves, changes in daycare or school arrangements, family absence, incidents of divorce or marriage, remarriage, and the steadiness of the mother's employment. So, the study has found that greater instability led to greater social and psychological problems through adolescence and early adulthood. These children who had less stable home lives had more problems among their peers with submissiveness, aggressiveness, and anxiety. Next is that it's found that stability of family living conditions was more important because it was more of a determinant in development than socio-economic status. So, a research in the same vein is Morehouse's, who studied how change over time in the mother's work status during the child's preschool years influenced the child in the first year of school. So, this is in terms of school achievements and such. So, there was a comparison between mothers who had maintained the same employment status versus those who had changed to more working hours, fewer working hours, and to no working hours. So it was found that although it was strongest for mothers who had worked more hours, there was still disruptive impact for all mothers with changes to their work. So surprisingly, this includes the mothers with no working hours, who changed to having no working hours, as it was the fact that there was instability in the child's life at some point that affected their achievements in school. So, Morehouse concludes that instability on the whole is associated with less favorable school outcomes than stability. So stability is very important for the human development. We need structure in our lives, but this should not stray to the extreme, which is rigidity. As although we do need structure, we still need flexibility, as either could result in a negative development in our behavior. So the bioecological model is inspired by Glenn Elder's research on life course theory. Here are the four key principles that should be factored in or be able to be the focus of research designs of the same type of study. So first is historical time and place, which is like historical events, things such as that, and how it's able to impact the life of a person. Next is timing in lives, in which we're able to see how the timing of a certain event is able to impact a person differently. So, for example, um, how old or how young a person is during that type of event. So, a soldier who has enlisted to the military early in their life versus a soldier who has enlisted later in life. So, next is linked lives, and an example of this is how a prime example of this is how a significant event is able to impact the different members of the family differently. So things such as movements in history, things such as that, or like newer standards of morality, or things such as perceptions of racism, things like that. And next is human agency, in which we're able to see how individuals are able to make choices and actions that are taken within the constraints of their historical and social circumstances. So here is an additional principle that was proposed by the reading, which is changes over time in the four characteristics of the bioecological model do result from historical changes but also shape them. So, this has been made due to concerning findings in the current generation, which are attributed to the differences in child rearing conditions between decades, the old generations and the newer generations. So here is a figure with a summary of the concerning findings. So generally, there is an increased amount of crime, cynicism, and violence among the newer generation. And like earlier, this has been attributed to the difference in the child rearing conditions between the older generations and the newer generations. So proximal processes are fueled by emotional attachments coming from parents who are the principal caregivers and family members. So children require regular interaction and attachment in order to healthily develop in intellectual, emotional, social, and moral domains. But current workforce expectations are preventing adequate developments for these attachments, as parents are expected to get up early and to stay in their work late. And also, there are single parent families that are unable to adequately provide these type of interactions with these children due to the lesser amount of family members present, such as that. So, what can help alleviate this are third parties who are adults that assist the parent in caring for the child. They're able to assist and be able to provide the needed interactions for the child's emotional and psychological development. They're able to contribute along with the parent and to take the load off the parent's back in doing that individually. So, chaos in everyday environment leads to underdeveloped psychological growth. So, the current status of our society is that our chaos is growing at an intolerable level. And these are due to different factors such as political, social, and economical changes. So the end of the reading finds us with the concerns of the bioecological model. One is which the four components of the bioecological model should be linked to better understand their effects. And by linked, it means that we have not yet made this kind of certain connections, which is able to help us predict how our society is able to move on or progress from here. And next is that experiences in caring for each other should not be neglected. There are those that have not yet experienced how to care for another human being, such as caring for a parent, a friend, or a sick person, things such as that. And we should involve ourselves in this type of conversation, as caring for each other is essential for moving on of society, as we are built to care for each other. So thank you very much for listening. That's the end of our presentation.